Welcome to the SuperStar Communicator Podcast. Our aim is to ensure you speak and communicate with confidence, clarity, credibility, and impact, so that you present the best version of yourself in all business conversations. Welcome to our host, Susan Heaton-Wright.
Now, I've got good news, everybody. We've got the most wonderful person here. Welcome, Sam.
Why, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to sharing some stories and insights with your community.
Oh, absolutely brilliant. We have been discussing what we've got from the book, but I want to introduce you to everybody because we're really flamed up. We're really up there for this. So I want to introduce you before we go on. And that is that Sam Horn is on a mission to show how we treat people with respect. So they're motivated to respond in kind. Guess what? That's a really good human reaction, isn't it? She has had 3 TEDx talks, 10 books, including Tung Fu, Pop, and the latest book, Talking on Eggshells. She's been featured in the New York Times and presented to Oracle, Intel, Accenture, and the Asian Leadership Conference. Honestly, Sam, it is my absolute pleasure and Nick's pleasure to have you online.
Thank you. You know, we both believe in what we do. Katharine Graham of the Washington Post said, to do what you love and feel that it matters, how could anything be more fun? That's how we both feel, aren't we?
Absolutely, and Nick too.
Good. So shall we share hopefully some examples and tips that people can use to deal with difficult people without becoming one themselves?
Oh, absolutely. We've been discussing the fact that we're in a very, very polarized world. Here in the United Kingdom, we might, if we say the word Brexit, if we say the word Boris, if we say the word vaccine, we are likely to polarize people.
Yes.
And it's hard work, isn't it? And as a result, we go down this talking eggshells to avoid having those conversations.
You know, you're so right. In fact, I was on the phone with a friend, and I've known this friend for 20 years, and she happened to say that a certain political leader was the best that she had ever known, and I thought the exact opposite. And at the end of that phone call, I didn't know if we were ever going to speak to each other again. And I really felt fortunate because, you know, I've had a crisis of conscience. It's like I respect and admire this person. How could someone I know so well believe something that is, as you just said, the polar opposite of what I believe is true? And I realized she's not going to change my mind, and I'm not going to change her mind. And were we going to sacrifice a 25-year friendship over this one thing that we did not agree about? So I grew up on horses, and we lived in a small town, and there was quicksand out in the riverbeds. Now, did our parents forbid us from riding our horses and we just stopped doing it altogether, abandon it? No, we stayed clear of the quicksand. And so my friend and I called that a quicksand conversation. And if anyone watching is thinking of a family member, a friend, someone at work, and they have a good relationship, except for this one thing where they disagree, maybe it's time to focus on what we have in common instead of focusing on what we have in conflict.
Oh, that's just brilliant. I should share with you that the day after your last election in the United States, I delivered a leadership program virtually, because it was 2020, to a group of female leaders. And I could sense that there was something in the air because there were things people weren't saying, and I decided not to say it as an English woman that could cause conflict to possibly 50% of the people on that call. And I made a call on that, and in fact my client said afterwards, thank you for not mentioning it.
Do you know, you just practiced interpersonal situational awareness. Desmond Tutu said, we've got to stop pulling people out of the river. We've got to go upstream and find out where they're falling in. And Susan, you did what we call in the book, think upriver, right?
Oh, brilliant.
You read the room. You thought bringing this up and listen to these words will serve no good purpose, right? We're going to alienate people. We're going to introduce divisiveness. It's not why we're here to focus on that. So you anticipated something that might go wrong. You thought upriver and you prevented it from going wrong. Kudos.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. It was one of those moments. I could have said something, but it was not appropriate anyway, at the very least.
Many leaders feel that this is the number one skill gap in the workplace these days, is that they say we can hire coders, we can hire techies. We cannot hire people who read and lead the room. People who are attentive to nuance, people who will say, I've talked more than anyone else in this meeting. It's time for me to put a sock in it. I'm requesting this, but it's not good timing. I can tell that they're upset or distracted, and the answer is going to be no. And what we're talking about is, if we're talking on eggshells, if we start paying attention to the signals that are being sent us, we can often respond appropriately in the situation instead of stepping on people's toes.
Do you think that there is so much focus on what we're going to say? I come across people that teach about, speak like a leader. And it isn't speak like a leader, it's communicate as a leader. But there's so much focus on our message and what we're going to say and what outcomes are going to be.
Good for you for bringing this up. Is that let's have a specific example of how we can communicate, not just as a leader, as a human being that prevents conflict and that produces cooperation. Let's talk about what to do if someone's complaining, whether it's one of our employees, our committee members, or a customer. Often we think that if someone complains, we should explain. Oh, well, the reason why this is starting late, the reason why you didn't get this, we think if we explain why something went wrong, people will forgive us. Nope, they get angrier because explanations come across as excuses. People feel we're not being accountable. So instead, take the A train. A for agree. You're right. The meeting was supposed to start at 9 o'clock. A for apologize. And I'm sorry you've ended up waiting. A for act. And, we've got 15 minutes left. Let's jump right into it and rock and roll. And listen to how the A train expedites complaints. Explanations aggravate them.
And it's showing respect, isn't it, to the other person?
What you just said is that Mother Teresa said the world is full of good people. If you can't find one, be one. And as leaders, we have a ripple effect of example, is that when we set the precedent for respect, most people are motivated to respond in kind.
Do you have any comments, Nick?
Yeah, I was just thinking about how you would communicate with different kinds of people. Some people accept that and sort of just go with the flow and that kind of thing. But how would you vary your communication between people who are less more conflict avoidant, and people who are more willing to sort of fall out and get more conflicting in the kind of situation?
Nick, I'm glad you brought that up. Is that one of the things I discovered in writing Talking on Eggshells is there's basically 4 conflict styles. One is avoid, is especially if we grew up with parents that fought all the time. We had our pillow over our head just wishing it would go away. And when we see conflict nowadays, we head the other way. And then there's accommodate, and these are the people pleasers that go along to get along, and the yeses, yes people, etc. And then there's angry. Maybe we grew up with a parent, and when they wanted their way, they would get very loud and intense, and other people would back off, and they learned, okay, this is how you get what you want. And then there's assert. And what we're talking about is how we can assert what we want, need, and deserve in a way that is not offensive, that's actually proactive. Here's one of my favorite examples. There's a young woman, she has learning disabilities, and she works for something called the Salvation Army. It's the first job she's been able to hold because dealing with customers is very difficult for her. Well, she was thrilled when her boss told her she was up for promotion. The very next day, her boss told her she was in danger of getting fired. Now, if this had happened before, Brittany, conflict averse, would have dissolved into tears, probably would have gone home, maybe would have quit her job, and would have fallen into a depression. Her therapist had given her 6 words. So the next day she went back to work, asked for a meeting with her boss, and she said, "Could you please help me understand? Could you please help me understand how I'm up for promotion yesterday and I'm being threatened to get fired today?" And her boss said that a customer had complained how rude she was. Brittany remembered the situation. They had tried to return a mattress with the cover off, and that's illegal to take back a used mattress. She had politely explained the policy. The customer left in a huff. Now that the manager knew the real story, apologized to Brittany, thanked her for enforcing the policy, and gave her the promotion. So there's an example of someone who was conflict averse, and with the words, "Could you please help me understand?" uncovered what was really going on, which could be addressed satisfactorily for both of them, instead of them never speaking and both of them losing out.
That's so interesting, because there are so many people that are asked to do things, and I'm often told by my clients, but we have a culture of never saying no. I'm sure you've got some tips there.
I was thrilled when I discovered that that the book, my original book before talking on Eggshells, called Tung Fu, was the number 3 ranked book in South Korea. It was the most checked out book in their library. Why? Mm-hmm. It's because Chosin Biz, who is the newspaper for South Korea, said it teaches how to speak truth to power with respect, right? I think that we can say no to people. If when I talk about the old-fashioned scale of justice, can you picture the lady with the 2 plates like this and so forth? I think that the success of any relationship at work, in our family, even in public, depends on whether the scale of needs is kept in balance. Because, see, if we always say yes to someone, if we always go along with what they want, if we always give in to what they need, if we always put them first, that's in an equal relationship, isn't it? That means one person is resenting, even if they're not speaking up. They're still resenting the inequity in the relationship. At that point, it is not rude to say no. It is right. Do we have time for a quick example that shows?
Oh, we've got plenty of time. We've got plenty of time, honestly. Okay. We can carry on as long as we want, can't we?
Wonderful. Okay. All right. So here was a college counselor, and she said, "I'm at a college where many of the kids have come away from home for the first time, and they're intimidated. They have a lot of anxiety. They haven't made any friends yet. Everything's new." And she says, "My heart has gone out to them, so I've given them my home phone number." You know the rest of that story, Susan and Nick, don't you? They call at night, they call on weekends, and now after a while, she's getting burned out. Her compassion and her kindness to them is laudable. However, look at the scale of needs. She's feeling her students' needs. Her husband is not very happy because she's on the phone most of the night. On weekends, she's got to run chores, and then she's too tired for them to go out or for her to do any hobbies. So do you see, at that point, it is not rude, it is not cruel or unkind of her to bring the scale of needs back in balance. So now here's how she handled it with proactive grace. With her students, she said, "In the past, I have given you my home phone number and encouraged you to call if you needed some support." My husband and I have talked about this, and I realize I need to start taking better care of my health, and I need to recharge on the weekends, and I want to honor our marriage and spend time with my husband in the evening. If it is an emergency, you are welcome to call. We will have a 10-minute phone conversation, find out what's going on, if there's action to be taken. If it's not an emergency, my office hours are from 1 to 4 every day on the campus. Please plan on dropping by between 1 and 4, and I want to hear what's going on to see how we can move it forward. Do you see, she was able to say no and keep the needs in balance, and now she's serving her students, and she's serving her health, and she's serving her energy, and she's serving her marriage, and she's probably going to continue to work as a counselor instead of quitting because she's burned out.
Do you have a thought about that, Nick? I know
No,
somebody's done the thumbs up.
Yeah, I do.
Remember,
Well,
you can ask questions if you're watching.
yeah, I'd love to have a teacher like that. But it sounds interesting about how the use of language is very particular in that. And what kind of language would you use when it comes to that kind of situation? How technical of language should you use, or should it be sort of as empathetic or open as possible? I'm guessing it depends on the situation.
I'm glad you're bringing up specific language, because one of the things I hear back about on Eggshells is thank you. The other programs or books, they say, don't let people get under your skin. Well, I agree with that. I just don't know how to do that. So thank you for language, the words. Here's a situation with exact language of what to say. What can we say if someone's taking their anger or frustration out on us, right? What do we say when that's happening? It's so unfair. So here's the 60-second story, and then we'll have the exact language we can say if that's happening to us. I have an 84-year-old aunt who volunteers at a hospital. She did this even during COVID, and I asked what it was like. She said one word: stressful. I said, so think of a situation that was stressful when someone was taking their frustration out on you. She said, Sam, I don't even have to think about it. A woman rushed into the ER, holding up her phone, saying, I just got a text from my daughter. She was in an accident. She's in the ER. I need to see her. Well, Kay called the ER. Someone was already with the daughter. Now, you may remember the rules in COVID is that there was no visitors per patient, or only one visitor per patient per day. Kay had to tell the woman she could not get in with her daughter, and she lost it. She is screaming, sobbing at Kay. Now, if we juxtapose this, if you put a vertical line down the center of a paper, and over on the left are words to lose, and over on the right are words to use. Over on the left, put the words, how rude, how rude, why are you taking this out on me? I'm not the one who made the rules. Do you see how all of those how rude, how offensive, how mean, how cruel, those are reactions that make it worse. Over on the right, she asked herself 4 words. Do you know what they were?
How does she feel?
Well, Susan, close, very close. How would I feel, right, Susan? How would I feel if my daughter was in the ER and I couldn't get in to see her? It moved her from impatience to empathy, from contempt to compassion, and gave her the incentive to turn, there's nothing I can do, to let me see if there's something I can do. She called the ER back and she said, who is with the daughter? It was the Uber driver who had brought the young woman in. Kay was able to explain the situation, thank him, he left, and the mother was able to get in with the daughter. And that's the beauty of the language at the right time. Whether it's something we say to ourselves, how would I feel? It's like, why might they be doing this? That moves us from contempt to compassion.
Right.
Do you feel that there's an element of reframing a situation?
I just love your questions. Nick and Susan, keep them coming.
And anybody else who's watching. We've had some questions beforehand, so
yes. This is absolutely, it is all about reframing. And it is about being a pattern interrupt. The singer Elvis Presley said, when things go wrong, don't go with them. And see, over on the left, people accuse us of something that's not true. We deny it. That's not true. Now we're arguing with the people, right? If someone says, you women are so emotional, we're not emotional. Now we are, right? So over on the left, if someone makes an accusation, do not deny it. Because if someone says, you don't care about your customers, we do too care about our customers. Now we're arguing with our customers about whether we care about our customers. Over on the right, say these 4 words. What do you mean? Because if we say, what do you mean? They may say, well, I've left 3 messages and no one's called back. Oh, I am so sorry. Do you see how it reveals the real issue? And we can address that instead of reacting to the attack?
That's so interesting, because only last week I was working with a client and she'd been accused of being aggressive rather than assertive, which we both know, Sam, that there is a tendency for women to be accused of that, even if the accusation, even if it's an assertive thing they've said. Using your what do you mean would be a great response, and doing it calmly and having that conversation, and to perhaps come to the conclusion that the other person had some unconscious bias, possibly.
See, thank you for, the subtitle of the book is Soft Skills for Hard Conversations. I don't think any of us like to be accused of being aggressive or being, and the natural reaction is to deny or defend, which once again proves their point. So I was speaking at a women's leadership conference one time, and a woman put her hand up and said, why are women so catty to each other? Well, I don't know, Susan, Nick, if you've heard that before. I've heard that a lot. And I decided it was time to redirect that conversation, to change it. And so instead of denying it, I don't think women are catty to each other, because, see, we're arguing and reinforcing her negative stereotype there. We just say, do you know what I found? That's the bridge. Do you know what I found? Women are real champions for each other. They're real mentors. In fact, I wouldn't have this job if it wasn't so. So once again, if someone says you're too aggressive, instead of arguing with them over, which, is kind of proving their point, ask, what makes you say that? Why do you think that? And now they may say, well, you really pushed hard for that legislation. You're right. I did push hard because I really believe it's important and I want to get the vote out. Do you see how you claim what you do want to be on record for instead of denying an inaccurate stereotype?
Yeah, that's great. And so in a kind of high stakes situation, what can we say in the first 60 seconds of that situation of communication to win a kind of buy-in?
Thank you. If this were softball, you just teed it up and we get to hit this one out of the park, okay? So now I hope, unless you're driving, that people grab a piece of paper, because I'm about to share a technique of what to say in the first 60 seconds of a presentation, of a pitch, of a negotiation, can get people's eyebrows up and can win respect and buy-in in the first 60 seconds. So first, I hope everyone listening in, watching, think of a project you've got where you want to get it funded, or think of a program that you want approved, or think of an idea that you want green lighted. So what is something you want? Think of the situation where, whether it's online or in person, where you're going to be requesting this or recommending. So everyone have an idea in mind. Now here's the story, and then we're going to unpack 3 steps of what to say in the first 60 seconds that has the power to help that get a yes. So I was the pitch coach for something called Springboard Enterprises, which has helped entrepreneurs generate $27 billion in revenue. So one of my clients, who is Kathleen Callender of PharmaJet, came to me, said, Sam, I've got good news. I've got bad news. I said, what's the good news? She said, I'm pitching to a room full of investors. I said, that's great news. I said, what's the bad news? She said, I'm going at 2:30 in the afternoon, and I only have 10 minutes. She said, Sam, you can't say anything in 10 minutes. How are we going to talk about our finances, about our team credentials, about our patent pending, about our exit strategy? I said, Kathleen, you don't have 10 minutes. You have 60 seconds. They will have heard 16 other presentations. Okay, here is the 60-second opening we came up with that not only helped her win millions in funding, she was selected as Business Week's most promising social entrepreneur of that year. Okay, ready? 60 seconds. Did you know there are 1.8 billion vaccinations given every year? Did you know up to a third of them are given with reused needles? Did you know we're spreading and perpetuating the very diseases we're trying to prevent? Imagine if there were a painless one-use needle for a fraction of the current cost. You don't have to imagine it. We're doing it. She's off and running. Are your eyebrows up? Do you want to know more?
Absolutely.
Now, here's how everyone can do this. 3 steps. First step, ask 3 did you know questions with startling statistics about the problem you're solving, the issue you're addressing, the need you're meeting. Because most of us are taught to tell people we're going to tell them. That's a prescription for being a bore, snore, or chore. Do not start off by telling people. That's infobesity. Instead, ask 3 did you know questions with these startling statistics. And I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't know that many people were being affected. I didn't know that it's getting worse. Do you see how we got eyebrows up by asking instead of telling? Second, use the word imagine.
Oh, I love that word.
Isn't it, Susan? Because it pulls people out of their preoccupation. Right now, they're picturing our point. They're seeing what we're saying. Link the word imagine to 3 benefits of what it is we're proposing. So go back to Kathleen Calendar. What are her decision makers thinking about? Reuse needles, so we made it one use. They're thinking about painful inoculations. We made it painless. Most decision makers are thinking about money. We made it a fraction of a current cost. Do you hear how in a world of infobesity we distilled into one sentence this, who wouldn't want that? And then the third step, say these words. Back to you, Nicholas, language. You don't have to imagine it. We're doing it. Now come in with precedents or evidence to show this isn't speculative. This is a done deal. Here's the proof of concept. You can do that in 60 seconds. You're going to have people at hello if you do that.
And if you've got people in imagining it, you've essentially got your idea in their heads and they're thinking about it.
Nicholas, think about what you just said. Not only are we in their head, they're picturing it, imagining it, which is closer to it being a done deal, right? Is that they are, now we're in a dialogue instead of a monologue, right? We're not just talk. They are, just as you said, actively engaged where they're taking it on board, which means they're halfway to a yes.
Yeah, great. And following along with the 60-second motif, what can we say in the last 60 seconds of a high-stakes situation to prompt, follow up, and or close a deal?
Okay, so now I hope everyone watching, listening, are thinking about what they're going to ask in the first 60 seconds instead of tell. Now let's go to the last 60 seconds. So once again, a story to show how this works in the real world. Then we'll unpack it with step-by-step suggestions on what you can do so that you're going to motivate people in the last 60 seconds to follow up with you. Because do you know how most people end a presentation or a pitch?
Thanks. Thanks for listening.
That's it. Talk about leaving money on the table, right?
Do you have any questions?
That's right. Another kind of passive, sweeping, platitude that a lot of people think, no, I just want to get out of the room at this point. I don't want to prolong it. So here's Marcia. And now Marcia had been an executive at MTV, and now she was starting her own business. She too was pitching to investors. I said, we're going to give you a competitive edge. Everyone else is going to say, do you have any questions or thank you, or run long and be hustled off the stage. So here's what she said, then we'll unpack it. Once again, I'm Marcia. I'm the one with the white spiky hair. At our next break, I'm going to be at our booth at the lobby at 2:30. If you would like a product demonstration, if you'd like to talk with our CMO about what we're going to be doing to market this, or our CFO about our financials, please come and speak to us. Once again, I'm Marcia with the white spiky hair. I look forward to seeing you at 2:30. Guess who is surrounded by people at 2:30?
Everyone knew what to do. You told them.
See, so, and we told them and we invited them, didn't we?
Yeah.
And we gave them incentives. So here specifically, I hope everyone's thinking about their project. Step number 1, say your name with a pause and a punch. Because most of us rush and blush. If I put my first and last name together, my name is Sam Horn, you go, huh? Look at those eyebrows. And crunched up eyebrows mean I don't get it. And if we don't get it, we don't remember it. So my name is Sam, pause, 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 punch, Horn. The last name is louder than the first name because now people can repeat it after hearing it once. Now, mention something you're wearing. I'm Susan in the blue shirt. I'm Nick in the check shirt. I'm Sam with the gold necklace. Because if we're at a conference and there's a sea of suits, we kind of blend in with the crowd. But if we go, there's Susan Heaton-Wright in the blue blouse, you see how you stand out and people do not walk up to someone if they don't remember their name because it's awkward and embarrassing. You just made it easy for them to find you and approach you. Now, second step, always say where and when they can follow up. At lunch, I'm going to be at the far table on the right. If you'd like to continue on Monday, I'm going to be in my office from 1 until 4. On the first week of August, I'll be back in London. Do you see how if you say a time and a place, people now are already thinking, I know when to call them or when to walk up to them and where to find them. Now the third step, what are 3 reasons why they would want to continue the conversation? If you'd like a copy of that article we wrote about, if you'd like to see the video that I mentioned, if you would like this, so people are going, yes, I want that. I know where I can find them. I remember their name, and you have dramatically increased the likelihood people will take action because you were proactive instead of passive about setting it up.
That is just superb. That 3 steps is so clear. And you're right, aren't you? So many people want to sort of scuffle off, say thank you, and then go and get a coffee or hide because they imagine there's going to be a walk of shame, that no one will go and come and talk to them. But the reality is that people need to know that it's okay to come and talk to you and know your name and know what you look like and know what to talk about.
And think about, we call these friendly phrases in the book because, we've heard the saying, it's nothing personal, it's just business. Come on, we're dealing with people here. It's all personal, right? And yet many, especially online communication these days, is so cryptic. It's emojis. It's one sentence. Will you be at the meeting? When will that project be ready? It's like, you've got to call Tony in accounting or something like that. It's very abrupt, bordering on rude. And no wonder there's this friction between people. We can warm up our communication by doing something that's called bookending. And as an author, we know that if we start with something and then reference it in the last page, people feel a very satisfying full circle, right? So let's start bracketing our communication with these warm phrases. Appreciate and look forward. I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. It's like wanted to confirm our agreement. Listen to these words that put the humanity back into business instead of it just being just the facts.
Do you know, it's so interesting because one of the things I do, talk about ding-dong words. Think, sorry, but I just want to say, I feel, you're going like this. I think, and I have a little bell that I ring and everyone goes, oh my goodness, yes, I do that. And it's soft, it's sugarcoating, isn't it? But it's not making it human like what you said. Do you understand the difference? That it's the ding dong words they're self-deprecating, aren't they?
Susan,
Whereas the words you're using are still human, they're still respectful, they're not sugarcoating, but they're not being disrespectful to other people.
You have just made such an important point, Susan, because remember we talked about that second style of conflict aversion is accommodate, right? And when we do it's just my opinion. It's like, those kinds of things are essentially approval seeking. It's like, I'm not convinced about this. I haven't done my research about this. I'm not speaking from a place of authority. I'm speaking from a place of people pleasing, correct? And especially if decision makers are trying to decide whether to put us in a position of leadership, this does not have a voice of authority. Mm-hmm. And we can have warm authority. It's like, instead of saying, well, I hear what you're saying, but, I hear what you're saying, and can we find out where that went wrong last time and how we can keep that from happening again this time? See, and instead of but. Should. Well, you should have called if you didn't understand that. From now on, if you'll please call if you don't understand, that shapes behavior instead of shames it. It's you'll have to. Well, you'll have to, you're just going to have to wait. We haven't received approval from payroll yet. Those you have to are orders, and most people don't like to be ordered around. If you could please call payroll and see when they're going to be able to. So as you're saying, there are warm, professional words that have humanity and a voice of authority that connotes leadership that can be trusted.
Good. And if we anticipate our decision makers will be skeptical, how can we turn their no into a yes?
Well, once again, you've asked a great question. So if we have that piece of paper, and once again, why do I have these words reactions on the left and words responses on the right? It's because a publisher called Barrett Kohler, Steve Persante, was the publisher, and I asked him, what's your criteria for publishing a book? He said 3 words. You know what he said? Show the shift, right? So see, as leaders, when we take notes, if we have a piece of paper and a vertical line down the center, and on the left are the beliefs, the behaviors, the attitudes, and the actions that sabotage our effectiveness. On the right are the beliefs, the behaviors, the attitudes, and the actions that support our effectiveness. So this is conflict on the left, cooperation on the right, resentment, resistance on the left, rapport, and respect on the right. So now we're coming back to what you just said, Nick, is like, let's put a no on the left, right? We're going to get a no. They're skeptical, cynical. They're thinking we don't have money in our budget for this. They're thinking we tried it before, we didn't work. The answer is no. Over on the right, let me tell you a story, and then once again, we'll unpack it. And I hope everyone listening is thinking of a situation where they anticipate that the decision maker is going to be sitting there like this, resisting it, just waiting for us to stop talking so they can tell us no. So I had an opportunity to work with a client who was going to pitch the CTO of the London Olympics. And I said, how much time do you have? He said, I have an hour. I said, Mike, you don't have an hour. I said, put yourself in the shoes of this decision maker. What is he thinking? And he said, well, he's probably thinking we're 212 days out from the games. We don't have time for this. I said, step 1, guess what the first words out of your mouth are. You may be thinking, not I know you're thinking, because that's presumptuous, right? No, you might be thinking, or I imagine you may be thinking, We're 212 days out from the London Olympics. We don't have time for this. So step one is anticipate why they will say no and say it first. Because if we don't say it, they're not listening and they're waiting. Second step, we just talked about it. Bridge with the word and rather than but. Because as soon as we say, I'm sorry that happened, but I understand it's important to you, but, it's like, I know you said no to this in the past, but we are setting up a conflict. Use the word and. Third point, make their objection moot. So if they're thinking we don't have money in our budget for this, you can say, you may be thinking we don't have money in our budget for this, and I've identified where we're going to find that money and make it back in the first 3 months. Then it's going to be stream of revenue in the months thereafter. Now they're at least going to give us a chance, right? And you want to know the fourth step? It's based on something Richard Branson said. He said, time is the new money. And I think time is a new trust. Always take less time than they anticipate. Because, Mike, if you walk in there and say what we've said and then say, and I know we have an hour scheduled for this, and I know how much you have on your plate, and I've distilled my pitch into 10 minutes. At the end, if you have questions, you want to continue the conversation, I welcome it. If you have other priorities, you'll have our information. You can follow up when it's convenient. Now, Mike pushed back. He said, Sam, I can't explain this app in 10 minutes. I said, Mike, if you take more than 10 minutes, he is going to be actively resenting you for taking him away from these other priorities. So I said, you've got to. Furthermore, when we take less time than people expect, guess what? They trust we will always be a good use of our time. They will always take our phone call. They'll always ask us on a meeting because they trust that we will cut to the chase and be a good use of their time.
We have a mutual friend in common, don't we, in Joe McCormack?
Oh, with the Brief Lab. Yes, we sure do.
And it makes complete sense. People at first are really frightened at the idea of this, but keeping it headline.
So let me tell you a quick story about Joe. Is that Joe came to work with me in Reston, Virginia, and as you know, he had a corporate narrative boutique consultancy at that point, and he wanted a book deal. And I thought, Joe, we're going to do this real quick. People, put a vertical line down the center. Over on the left, put individual. If you're just an individual or a blogger or a speaker or a consultant, you're one of many. It's very hard to sell or scale a business when you're an individual because you got to be there, right? So over on the right, I said, Joe, we're going to develop an umbrella brand of business equity. So he founded, now here's the story. At that point, he worked with a lot of people in the military. And he was talking about communication. I said, there's a lot of people out there on corporate narrative and communication, so you're still one of many. So now, I had been married to a Navy captain, and I knew that when you present to a 4-star admiral or general, what's that called? It's called a brief. You brief, the executive. And the clock is ticking the second you start talking. So I said, Malcolm Gladwell and Blink, the grit is Dan Pink and Drive, is that when you can own one word in the public's consciousness, you'll go to the head of the class, Angela Duckworth with grit. So I said, so you know what we're going to call your book? Brief. Because boom, you're going to own that word in the public's consciousness, and you're not going to stop there. Because if you're just an author with a book called Brief, if you're just a speaker with a book called Brief, you still don't own it. You're going to be the founder and the CEO of the Brief Lab. So those are all one-syllable words. Now you own that space. Now you are founder and a CEO. Now you have no competition because you're one of a kind instead of one of many. And now you know the rest of that story is that we got a book deal for Joe in 48 hours. We put together a 4-page pitch to him. I knew Matt Holt at Wiley Publishers. And because we were able to go from a one-of-many consultancy to a one-of-a-kind business entity that had equity. It catapulted his career, and he's been serving people and making a difference for people around the world ever since.
Oh, that's superb. And as you know, he's been on this podcast as well. And quite often with my clients, I provide additional blended learning resources as well as recommendations of books, of which your book will be going on that. And I'm sure that your podcast, when it's a podcast, will be shared with clients as well as part of their resources, along with Joe's, and because they're different things, because we help each other, we lift each other up.
Kudos to you. Susan and Nick, I think Arthur Schweitzer said that in influencing people, example is not the main thing. It's the only thing. And think of the rising tide example you're setting of supporting colleagues. You're not competing with other people who speak on leadership, write about it, communication. It's like, no, are these people bringing something to the table? Do we share the same values? Are we committed to making a difference? Then giving them a rising tide platform on your podcast and recommending them says a lot about you, because it means you're secure in what you do and you are champions for other people. One of the many reasons why we respect the work you do.
Thank you. Now, before we go, this has just been brilliant. Nick, I hope I'm not jumping over you. What are your 3 tips to share with the audience? I can prompt you if need be.
Okay, well, 3 tips. And number 1 is that let's go back to the piece of paper. Let's shape behavior on the right instead of shame it on the left. Do we have time for a 60-second example of that?
Oh, absolutely. More than, yeah.
Okay. I was visiting my son and his 1-year-old son. We're getting caught up in the living room, and his son, Hero, crawls across the floor, hauls himself up on a guitar stand in the corner, and he starts pounding on the strings. Now, over on the left, Andrew could have yanked the guitar away and made him feel bad. He could have said, stop pounding on the guitar. He could have said no, all of which would have made Hero feel bad. Guess what he did? He said one word: gentle. And I saw Hero's face transform in front of me. And he reached back to the guitar and went strum, strum.
Aww.
And he made music because Andrew shaped his behavior instead of shamed it. He was a coach instead of a critic. Hero learned from that situation instead of lose face. And my dad used to say, we can't make people do better by making him feel bad. And he showed him how to do it better instead of making him feel bad. So that's 1 tip. All right, we got another one? Okay, number 2, over on the right, put find solutions. Over on the left, put find fault. Is that, say we're in the middle of a meeting and something's gone wrong and people are finger pointing, fault finding, and so forth. Be a physical pattern interrupt. Do you play sports by any chance?
I used to.
Okay, Nick, what sports do you? Okay, and Nick, what sports do you play?
Swimming and rock climbing.
Oh, good. Okay, swimming and rock climbing. You ever play basketball or anything by any chance?
Yeah, in school.
Okay, then you know what an umpire does. If everyone's getting into a fracas and fighting and so forth, what does an umpire do, right? Time out. I think if we're in a meeting and the blaming's begun, if we try and talk over them, they'll just get louder. The voice of reason gets drowned out in the motion. So say, time out. And then over on the right, say these 4 words. Let's not do this. We could argue for the rest of the day about who dropped the ball on this. It's not going to undo it. Instead, or we can say, this won't help. This won't help. blaming each other, calling each other names isn't going to help. Instead, and so when things go wrong, instead of finding fault, find solutions by being the pattern interrupt and then moving people to what we can do about it instead of what should have been done about it. Okay, we got one tip for one more?
Yeah.
Okay. It's over on the left. Let's get rid of the words no, can't, because. No, you can't because. Can I leave early today because my daughter's got a play at school? Oh, no, you can't. This is our busiest time of year. You know better than to ask, right? It's those words, no, can't, because, are like a verbal door slamming in someone's face. People will resent us because they will think that we are the one blocking them from what it is they want. Over on the right, put the words yes, as soon as. Yes, you can leave as soon as you get this project done and turned into headquarters. They're waiting for it and need it by end of business. And if you work through lunch and get it done early, you're welcome to go to your daughter's play. Now, by the way, it's Susan, are you a mom by any chance?
Yes, I am. I've got one son.
Okay. Then is that a mother told me this is going to change the way I parent. She said, I have 3 kids under age of 10. It seems like all I ever do is tell them no. No, you can't play with your friends because you haven't done your homework. No, you can't watch TV because you haven't done your chores. And then you usually do what's called stacking, which is like, you know the rules around here. That TV doesn't go on until how many times do I have to tell you? She said, Sam, when I tell them no, they think I'm a big meanie, keeping them from what they want. When I say, yes, you can play with your friends as soon as you finish your homework. Do your math, let me look at it, then you can go out and shoot hoops. Yes, you can watch TV as soon as you finish your chores. Take out the trash, clean up your room, then you can. She said, this isn't just semantics. It changes the whole dynamic of the relationship because now look who's responsible for getting what it is they want.
I wish I'd known that when my son was younger. I hope I haven't damaged him.
It's kind of a negotiation of and giving someone motivation to do a kind of chore before they can get a reward out of it as well.
Mm-hmm. And this works in business. If someone says, once again, people are focused on, can I move forward with this project? Well, no, we can't because we're still waiting to hear from shipping whether they're going to be able to get it there in time. Yes, we can move this forward as soon as we get in touch with shipping and they confirm the date. Do you see how it puts us on the same side instead of side against side?
Oh, that's so brilliant. And before we finish, I wanted to share with you how powerful something that you put in about a mother and dementia, reframing. There were some situations that you shared. One of them was, it's so difficult because they don't understand what I'm saying and all of those things. Now, my dad died of Alzheimer earlier this year. And it was, and I phone up my mum every day. She's a widow, and sometimes I think, and I always reframe it like you're doing by saying she's lonely. She was married to my father for nearly 64 years. She might not have spoken to anybody else today, although she probably has. I'll be able to share some of my news that might add something to her day. And it helped me to really appreciate that what I'm doing is right.
Susan, thank you for bringing up once again that I think we have an opportunity and a responsibility on a daily basis to be the quality of person we want to be, even when other people aren't. And as you just said, is that when you put yourself in your mom's shoes and you imagine her grieving and her loss and her loneliness, that it brought forth this empathy in you that helped you connect instead of being impatient or frustrated or no, you put yourself in her shoes, and really that is the core of all human communication, is to connect. And it is a result of what you just talked about, is that genuinely imagining what it is like for the other person. And when we do, we feel a compatibility and a commonality with them that brings us together.
Thank you. So, Nick, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think I do have quite a loaded question. It's a very big question surrounding the kind of idea of avoiding conflict. But if that's okay,
Please.
I was just wondering whether you think avoiding conflict itself is more damaging than actually being overly conflictive in any situation. And I was just wondering how you would consider breaking the ice for those kind of people who find avoiding conflict more of a thing they do.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. You know, my dentist has a sign in his office, and he says that these are the 5 most dangerous words in our language, and the sign is, maybe it will go away. Right? If often when we avoid conflict, it's because it's going to be uncomfortable or awkward, or we don't know what to say, or we don't want to hurt the person's feelings, we don't want to make them mad at us, all of those fears. And yet it will not get better. Avoiding it, it's not going to get resolved. In fact, it probably could fester. It could cause a distance or separation or a needless misunderstanding in the relationship. And if we say these words, in the past, I used to avoid conflict, and now I know it will not go away and it will not get better. It will get worse. So I choose, and let's not even call it, I know the subtitle of the book is a hard conversation. Let's call it an honest conversation. Look at this, we're reframing, Susan. It's like if we call it a hard conversation, it's kind of intimidating and scary, right?
Yes, it is.
If we call it an honest conversation, is that we come to this person, say, in the past, I would not have mentioned this. And yet I've been thinking about it a lot. And what you said really hurt my feelings. Or I feel that we're growing distant, and we're not talking about the things that matter. If we honestly talk about what's going on with us, I think more often we set a precedent for the other person to honestly talk about what they're coming from. And now we can come up with something that works for both of us instead of just avoiding it.
Brilliant. So this has been the most amazing discussion. Nick, would you agree with me on this? I'm
Definitely. I felt very engaged. I love your use of the guess what kind of setup question, because it really puts me in the head of what are you about to say kind of question. So that's really engaging.
And Nick, in a quick thought about that, because we're all students of communication, right? We one of the beauties of it, we can always get better. That this is Socrates essentially calls this appreciative inquiry. And that if we say 2 and 2 is 4 and 3 and 3 is 6, we're telling we are not engaging. And look what happens when we turn it into a question. What's 2 and 2? What's 3 and 3? Now we have a dialogue instead of a monologue. And just as you said, and thank you for that, Nick, we are talking with someone instead of to someone. It's all the difference.
This has been absolutely superb, and I have no idea if people watching live, but they will be able to watch it in playback, and then we create it into a podcast. And I'm absolutely certain that there is going to be a real buzz around this. So thank you so much. But before we go, we must plug your new book, which is called Talking on Eggshells. Please, Sam, share a little bit about it, because I don't want you to miss out on this.
Well, thank you. It's here it is, Talking on Eggshells. And I was, I grew up in a Cold War. Is that my dad was emotionally distant and my mom was emotionally wounded. And they were both wonderful people, and they taught my brother and sister and I to do the right thing. It was just, they grew up in the silent generation where you just grew distant. We would go for drives and have dinner tables where a word was not spoken. And then I was in a relationship for a while with a bully, with a narcissist, with a controller. And I tiptoed around this individual because I never knew what was going to set him off. He had a hair trigger temper. And if you said or did, quote unquote, the wrong thing, he would turn on you. So see, I learned to talk on eggshells in 2 of the major relationships in my life. And it is why I'm a woman on a mission, is that think of the irony. We learn calculus, and we do not learn how to talk with people in our life so that we can have close, warm communications or honest conversations when things go wrong. And if as a result of this book, people learn what to say when they don't know what to say, if they learn how to have an honest conversation and overcome a lifetime of being conflict averse, if they learn how to keep their cool in the heat of the moment or handle challenging situations in the moment instead of thinking of the perfect response on the way home, then that will make my day, because that is the purpose and the hope and dream of this. And it would mean the world if people read it and find it valuable and are able to put it to good use.
Thank you so much, Sam. What a wonderful person you are. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I'm speaking on behalf of Nick, but thank you so much for bringing so much wisdom, so much knowledge to our live stream.
I've enjoyed every minute, and I hope people watch this. And then, sometimes what people do is they play this at a staff meeting and they use it as a conversation catalyst. It's like, all right, what's going on with your coworkers? What's going on with your customers? As a leader, what is just one idea that can help you communicate even more respectfully and proactively with your team members? So what I hope is that people not just watch it and say that was a good program. They think, who can I share this with and discuss it with, so that it's planting seeds for follow-up conversations that impact even more people.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So until next time, this is Nicholas and Susan from SuperStar Communicator. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you very much for listening to the SuperStar Communicator podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to contact us at superstarcommunicator.com.